You're on.
I'm on. We're late night from Willowdale, but not really from Willowdale anymore. But we needed to talk about the French elections. An amazing event that happened in France today, and not unexpected, but we didn't know what was going to happen because no one makes predictions on elections anymore, not since Trump beat Hillary. So I'm drinking some French wine, and just thought to congratulate the people of France for making the right decision. So I'm going to put the wine away because we need to chat about this. You know, the French made the right decision today, and if France had if the French had elected Marine Le Pen, even though she'd moderated a lot of positions from her father and everything, it would have been a disaster for Europe. The European project essentially would have been dead. The European project being the European Union, and for many countries the Eurozone, which came out of the horrors of the Second World War. You know, the European project, Treaty of Rome, and eventually the European Union that we see today, and then the Eurozone coming out of Maastricht in '92. European project has been one of the major success stories of modern history. The wars, the violence, uh, in Europe in the 20th century, and then since the end of the Second World War, there's been relative peace in Europe, except for what happened in the Balkans uh, in the 90s. Uh, the European Union is not a perfect union, okay, and it's, as Robert Kaplan wrote in the New York Times the other day, it's an imperfect. It's kind of it's an imperfect. I'm paraphrasing here. It's an imperfect imperialism. Um, uh, the European. It's an imperfect empire. An imperfect empire. Yeah, there are lots of problems with the European Union, and there's lots of disparities between the Southern Europe, the Balkans, Northern Europe. The Netherlands, Germany, France, uh, Scandinavia, they tend to benefit more. But it's still a good union, and it still definitely has been a success for most Europeans and most people who live in Europe. And the French made a really smart decision today by voting for Emmanuel Macron. Yeah, he's kind of a, who knows what he is, right? A 39-year-old technocrat. Um, but he does believe in the European project, and he believes in tolerance, and he believes in immigration, and he believes that Europe is best served with with a unified Europe. And Le Pen Le Pen had a more inward looking, even though the party's politics were moderated, she had a more inward looking view, intolerant towards immigrants, and certainly intolerant towards Muslims. Party had a history of the National Front had a history of anti-Semitism. There were Nazis in Le Pen's campaign, just like there were white supremacists and Nazis in Trump's campaign. Uh, it's funny because the far right wing in the United States was a big supporter of Le Pen. They really tried to get her uh, into office, um, and it's so. But whatever, the French made an overwhelming decision. What is it, 65-35? 65% for Macron, 35 for her, to stay basically steady as we go. And yeah, lots of problems with the European Union, lots of problems with France, 10% unemployment, jobless recovery, things we've heard all around the world. But the decision to go for Macron means that France will stay in the European Union, will have a pro-European message, and that's really important because the European project is very important for the stability of the world. And don't underestimate it. We do not want to go back to 1914 or to 1939. So the European project is very important for stability of the world. The Dutch the Dutch retained the center. The Dutch elections, actually, they weren't as definitive as the French elections. The Dutch, though, at least retained the center. They moved to the right somewhat, but the center held in Holland or in the Netherlands. the center held in Austria, and now it's held in France, and it'll most likely, certainly hold in Germany, because the two big people, Angela Merkel and her competitors, are all pro-European Union, and I think the European Union is safe for now. Britain's exit, well, it is what it is. Britain was always a fair weather friend of the European Union. Britain is an odd country in a way. They didn't see themselves part of Europe, but they're not part of North America, even though they're only 50 miles off the European French coast. And of course, they're linked now by train, London to Paris, and we don't know what's going to happen in the British elections. But Britain is becoming the odd person out in Europe, and and now we're often worried about Italy. They always say Italy was the country we had to watch in Europe. I think Britain just totally disintegrate? Will Scotland and Northern Ireland go their own way? So we're going to have to watch this. Britain is, man, and the British, they haven't really suffered yet since the Brexit vote of almost a year ago. But they will. They will. I think they're going to be, now that France has made a decision, I think that Britain's going to have some tough going with the European Union. And they will suffer. The economy will suffer. They made the wrong choice a year ago. They could also reevaluate that choice. But if they continue on this path and Brexit does actually happen, I can see Scotland and Northern Ireland going their own way. And Great Britain will no longer be Great Britain. And so be it. I'm not going to linger on that because I want to make this video short. I've already. But it's interesting. Putin didn't get his person. Putin did not get Le Pen into the Elysee Palace in Paris. And Putin got his man in the White House. But ever since the election of Trump into the White House, the Russians have been sidelined. There was an interesting piece in the New York Times, according to the New York Times again, which is because it was fascinating, is how Putin almost feels hurt. The Russian elite feel hurt that Trump is totally sidelining them when Putin basically helped Trump get into power. Now, we know there are lots of factors here, and I'm not going to go on this video about all these factors that helped Trump beat Hillary Clinton, because there are lots of factors involved. Not just the Russian influence or Comey's decisions or whatever. But Putin does feel sidelined, and that is an interesting development in world affairs. The Russians really thought that they had their guy in the White House, and it didn't. And it didn't happen. And they really put a lot of effort into getting Le Pen elected in France, and that didn't happen. So the Russians, their sort of nefarious, sort of hacking, whatever they do, has stalled. And Putin is now isolated on the world stage. And Trump has played the China card. And just like Richard Nixon did, and Kissinger did in the early 70s. And of course, Kissinger and Nixon were sophisticated, and they knew what they were doing. Trump doesn't know what he's doing. But in a sense, he has played the China card. He's cozying up to President Xi, and hoping that President Xi will help him with North Korea. And that's a smart strategy, actually. And he's lapped all sorts of praise on President Xi. And he's ignored Russia, and the Russians are hurt, and they're sidelined. And that's very, well, where that goes, I don't know. Putin gambled, and I think he lost. And we'll see where that goes. Now, Trump is always a wild card. Now, Trump is a wild card in world affairs, all right? An absolute wild card. We did, in a sense, Trudeau gambled on Trump, too, and
he kind of lost.
Right. On the softwood lumber thing. He probably could have had a deal on softwood lumber with the Obama administration. And he thought, well, Trump being a realtor and a builder, he'll want competitive lumber prices. We'll probably get a better deal with him. Well, obviously, the first country that Trump turned on wasn't Mexico, wasn't China, it was Canada. And, of course, the people around the world said, what, Canada? And Trudeau gambled by not going with Obama on a deal, think he'd get a better deal under Trump, and he lost. That's ultimately Canada will win in international trade tribunals. But it goes to show you the crazy, erratic behavior of Donald Trump. And I think this video is going on longer than I want, but the bottom line is, I think Trumpism, I think the reason the Dutch, the French, the Austrians turned against crazy populism because they saw what was going on in the United States after Trump was elected. This crazy first 100 days of Donald Trump's presidency, how nothing's worked, and just how American foreign policy has become total erratic and incoherent. And the first country turned on was Canada, and people were shocked around the world. Now Canada will win in trade tribunals, and I don't think we're entering into a trade war with the United States. The Trudeau government has played this one smartly. They don't overreact. They've played the pure, as I said in a previous video. Justin's dad played this one well with Reagan, and Justin is playing this well with Donald. But Trump is an odd guy, and I'm going to end this video with a couple of Trump impressions. Trump is, of all the American presidents, Trump is the easiest to imitate. I think since SNL, as a kid, SNL started in the mid-'70s, and Carter was in first Gerald Ford, and then Carter. Dan Aykroyd did a great impression of Jimmy Carter, and Reagan was harder to imitate. But, Dana Carvey did the first George Bush really well. And Obama was hard to imitate. Bill Clinton was easier. And so it was Carter, obviously, because they had Southern drawls, easier to intimidate. Obama was more difficult. But Trump is easy. Everyone can do a Trump imitation. And I just want to end this with Trump, like my little imitation of Trump. I love it when he goes after Elizabeth Warren, the senator of Massachusetts. I don't particularly like Pocahontas. She's gonna go against me. I'll see what happens. And then he goes on, like in his speeches, he's so erratic, He goes on, President Xi of China, he's my friend. He's a good friend of mine now. I don't like Vlad anymore. I love Xi. Justin Bieber Trudeau, he's my friend, but got soft lumber, NAFTA, you got a LAFTA on NAFTA, and I don't know, but Xi is my friend, and I love Kim Jong-un, and he's a smart cookie, and we're going to have a wonderful time because I love people like him. Le Pen, okay, she didn't win. I'll deal with Macroni or whatever his name is. And anyways, I could do.
You could go on and on.
I could go on and on. Everybody could do a Trump imitation. But it said the thing is with Trump is he's a laugh, right? He's not a sophisticated person. He was a con man. He made it all the way to the White House as a con man. He's not a serious thinker, and his speeches are laughable, and of course, everyone loves to imitate Trump with his kind of short sentences. Can't even speak in full sentences, right? And the biggest wild card is in the world now is Trump. Not the French have made a decision. The Germans will either go for Merkel or they'll go for another pro-European Union candidate. Europe is safe. Is what does the world again think is, okay, now the unstable guy is the guy in the White House. And we don't know where American foreign policy is so incoherent right now, and it's actually quite dangerous. And North Korea is a real issue, but yes, at all avenue, definitely. I think cozying up to Xi is a good thing, but even the Chinese, and I'm going to end with this, because even President Xi is tired of all the phone calls he gets from Donald Trump. Donald Trump wanders the White House late at night. He's lonely. He's bored. He's thinking, Jesus, I just want to go back to Trump Tower and start screwing people again like I used to do. And he calls Xi a lot. And the Chinese are getting kind of irritated. I think, you know what? We don't want to be your boyfriend. Xi doesn't want to be Donald Trump's boyfriend. Go to Vlad. Vlad wants your affection and love. Go to Vlad. But the Chinese have said they're getting tired of all these phone calls from Trump. Like, all of a sudden, oh, President Xi, I'm in the White House. Melania is in New York. Can I call you and we talk? Like, oh, God. The Chinese men said they're almost getting irritated. The whole thing is so laughable. And this video's gone long. But the world's in a horrible place. Yemen, which the U.S. is supporting the Saudi interventions in Yemen. Yemen is the biggest humanitarian crisis on the planet Earth, other than the South Sudan, which is horrible as well. And Yemen is something that the Americans and the Saudis caused. And where's Trump on this? He cares about Syrian kids, but doesn't care about Yemeni kids? Come on. We go on and on and on. The whole thing, the world's in a dangerous place. And as Richard Haas says in his latest book, it's a world in disarray. And but the French made a decision today that should give us all a bit of peace and quiet. And I think the Germans will make the right decisions later in the fall, and wherever Britain goes now, we don't really care. So, on that note, yeah, the world's in disarray. I don't care. The job's tough. I didn't expect it. I want to go to Mar-a-Lago. Like, I just don't care anymore.
Okay.
Good night.